When I first learned about the climate crisis, I was overwhelmed by feelings of grief and anger and frustration, powerlessness. But I think more than anything else, I remember feeling really confused. I couldn't understand how I hadn't learned about the climate crisis in school, why I hadn't seen it on the TV when my parents watched the news, why we didn't talk about it at the dinner table. And so I became obsessed with this idea of, why is it that the adults in my life are so good at sleepwalking, even when all of the evidence, all of the science shows that we're hurtling toward this cliff of climate and ecological collapse? What I've learned in the years since is that the most insidious form of climate denial is not, it's just not happening. Because actually that is now the minority. It is the belief that incremental solutions that fail to go to the root of the crisis will genuinely address the problem and lead to a more fair and equitable world. And this is the thing that really worries me, because I know that some solutions are kind of treated as these silver bullet solutions, and they get a disproportionate amount of airtime. I think of electric vehicles, for example. How much have we heard about EVs over the past few years? Now, looking at EVs, to take that example, the explosion in EVs has also led to an explosion in cobalt, right? It's a material needed to make EV batteries. The majority of the world's cobalt is produced in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we've seen an explosion in human rights abuses, in child labor, in absolutely horrifying working conditions for the people who are mining this material. And we see the quote-unquote global north looking the other way. And so we have to be very, very careful when talking about climate solutions that we're not inadvertently doubling down or perpetuating deeply entrenched injustice and human rights abuses in pursuing solutions that don't actually go to the root of the crisis. Because if we look at EVs, let's take a step back. We're not actually talking about, how do we change the combustible engine? We're talking about how do we redesign and rethink mobility? And that's a much more exciting question, because then we can talk about, all right, what are transport solutions that are accessible to the majority? How do we redesign our cities? If we made cities less car-friendly, they'd actually be much greener. Imagine if we used all of that parking space to create local food systems, to build playgrounds, to make cities more resilient so that they're not this hot, because it feels like a greenhouse in here, during the summer months. And so my invitation to people is to really think about how do we actually create more fair and equitable societies, and how is sustainability a means to that end? And to your question, I think that is a way to connect with people no matter where they fall on the kind of climate spectrum, because it's ultimately about how do we make better lives for everyone, and how do we do that by actually rewriting systems of inequality built on the oppression of the vast majority of people, built on a history of colonization, and built on the commodification of nature. Because frankly, we can do so much better, and all of the solutions that are presented here at Change Now are testament to exactly that.